Hey guys, what's up? So I'm gonna fix the so 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 this is gonna be into 2 o'clock, but it might be shorter because this is my dad's phone I'm recording on. Yeah. Recently, I am on YouTube with 30 subscribers, over 30 subscribers. So I'm gonna be reacting to her story competition. Did you see this her story competition?
I stabbed my 17-year-old son, and I'm not sorry. My husband came running downstairs and found me standing over him with red on my hands and red pooling on the carpet. My daughter was sitting on the stairs watching the whole thing, and she didn't say a word. My husband called 911, and his voice cracked on every word. My wife stabbed my son. Please send someone right now. The police threw me to the ground and cuffed me while paramedics carried my son out on a stretcher. He was screaming that I tried to kill him. My daughter still didn't say anything. My husband came to visit me in jail the next day. I'm filing for divorce, he said through the glass. The lawyer is already drawing up papers. I told him I needed to explain what happened, and he slammed both hands against the glass. You stabbed our son in our living room. You put a knife in your own child. There is nothing you could possibly say. I begged him to just listen to me for 5 minutes. I hope you rot in here, he said. I hope you never see sunlight again. My son gave a statement from his hospital bed saying I had always been unstable and that he lived in fear of me his whole life. My mother called and they patched her through. You're not my daughter anymore, she said. I'm telling everyone you died. My sister showed up at the jail. You're a monster, she said. I always knew something was wrong with you. My lawyer came with a stack of papers and told me the prosecutor was pushing for 25 years. My husband was testifying against me. My son was claiming years of abuse. Nobody believed I didn't just snap and try to murder my own kid. I told her I needed to talk to my daughter. She shook her head. She's not talking. She just stares at the wall. The psychologist says she's in some kind of shock. I told my lawyer to keep trying because my daughter was the only one who knew
That
what really
is
happened. 4
not
weeks later, my lawyer came back
how.
and her hands were shaking. She finally talked. I held my
That
breath.
is
She
not
said when
how
your son
we.
came home that night,
That
he was
is
talking to
not how
people who
we
weren't there
win.
and laughing at things nobody said. I nodded. She said she tried to go upstairs and he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into the living room, threw her on the floor and put his knee on her chest. My lawyer's voice dropped to a whisper. She said he pulled out a knife and held it to her throat, told her the voices said he had to kill her and then himself or they would never leave him alone. My lawyer closed the folder. She said you came downstairs and saw him holding the blade to her neck. You begged him to stop and he just laughed and pressed harder. There was red running down into her shirt. She said you grabbed the first thing you could find and stabbed him in the shoulder because it was the only way to make him let go. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve. She said you saved her life. I looked at my lawyer. He was going to slit my daughter's throat right in front of me. I had half a second to make a choice. I chose a wounded son over a dead daughter. I'm not sorry. A customer grabbed my shoulder and screamed she was going to get me fired, but I'm deaf. Apparently, she'd been trying to get my attention for 5 minutes while I stocked shelves with my back turned. Her face was blood red and her eyes looked unhinged. I stepped back and pointed to the badge on my vest that read, I'm deaf.
You're
Please
not
tap my
deaf.
shoulder for assistance. In
You're
her mind,
not
she'd been
deaf.
ignored for 5 minutes, so the badge had to be fake. She stared right at it and somehow got even more pissed off. I read her lips. Oh, I see exactly what game you're playing. I tried to sign that I could help her now, but she rolled her eyes like I was proving her point. She laughed and I caught the word pathetic before she stormed off. I grabbed my cart and moved to the next aisle thinking it was
Like a
over. I was putting coffee makers on the shelf
60-year-old.
when a bag of marshmallows hit my back. I turned around and she was standing there with her arms crossed, looking satisfied. I stared at her in
This
disbelief
girl.
and she raised her eyebrows like, what are you going to do about it? I turned back to my work and a box of tea bags hit my shoulder. Then another item. I spun around and she was grabbing things off the shelf and chucking them at me while filming on her phone. An older customer walked up to her and said something. She whipped around and told him to mind his own business. Then she got right in my face and started snapping her fingers next to my ear. When I didn't react, she moved behind me and clapped her hands together as loud as she could. I turned and signed that I was happy to help if she told me what she needed. She just mouthed words super dramatically, like I was stupid. Another customer tapped my shoulder and mouthed, get your manager. So I started heading toward customer service. She followed me like she was on a mission. She grabbed another customer by the arm and pointed at me while saying something. The customer looked horrified and pulled away from her. By the time I reached the front, my manager was already running over. She immediately went off on him, pointing at me over and over while shoving her phone in his face to show him the video. My manager held his hands up and signed while speaking. She's deaf. The woman's jaw dropped. Are you serious right now? She's been ignoring me for 10 minutes and now you're all in on this together? My manager kept his face neutral. She's actually deaf. Her badge explains how to get her attention. She crossed her arms. She's not deaf. She's a faker. I want her fired. My manager shook his head. I'm going to need you to leave the store. She planted her feet. I'm not going anywhere until you fire her, he sighed. You're causing a disturbance. Please leave. She stepped closer to him. You won't kick me out. My manager looked her dead in the eyes. I'm doing it right now. Leave. She let out a laugh. You don't mean that. I'm your wife. My manager's face went stone cold. I don't care. You need to leave my store right now. Everyone in that crowd just froze. Her face went from smug to panicked in 2 seconds. She clearly thought being his wife meant he'd take her side, but instead he looked at her like she was a stranger. She tried to grab his arm, but he stepped back and pulled out his radio. Security to customer service, please. The guard showed up within 30 seconds, and she immediately pointed her phone at him. Her hands were shaking as she looked between my...
That's not how we build. That's not how we build. Oh, she looks like. Oh my god, that is so ugly.
Manager and the guard like she couldn't believe this was happening. The guard gestured to the door, but she started recording him and screaming about her rights. This is assault. You're all assaulting me right now. My manager pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police. She looked around at the crowd that had formed, and I watched her soul leave her body. She finally started backing toward the exit, trying to keep her chin up like it was some kind of dignified retreat. She got escorted all the way outside, and through the windows, I watched her trip over the curb and nearly eat pavement before speed walking to her car. My roommate walked in and asked, "Have you seen the sweet bread that was in the cupboard?" "Yeah, I had some like an hour ago." "Why?" I answered, still scrolling through my phone on the couch. She dropped to her knees right there in the kitchen. I laughed because I thought she was joking, until I saw her hands shaking as she gripped the counter. "You ate it? The whole thing?" Her voice cracked like I'd just told her someone died. Suddenly, she lunged for the kitchen trash can and started tearing through it like a mad woman. "It was just one piece, Sophia. It was on the shared shelf." She didn't let me finish, just ran to the bathroom and slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I could hear her throwing up from emotional pain, which made my stomach turn. What the hell was in that bread? Before I could even process what was happening, her boyfriend Nikos burst through the front door, still in his EMT uniform because he left work early. "Where's Sophia?" he asked, breathless. She texted something about the bread. When I pointed to the bathroom, he walked in, and Sophia whispered something to him, and he went completely white like someone had died. I was starting to panic. My phone buzzed. It was our landlord. "Heard what happened. So sorry. Rent can wait this month." My hands started sweating as I stared at the message. That's when the cramping started in my stomach. Sharp, sudden, enough to fold me over. Another wave hit, and I groaned. Nikos came out of the bathroom supporting Sophia, whose face was blotchy from crying. "We need to go to the hospital," he said. "Now." "What? Why? Is it food poisoning?" "This isn't food poisoning." His voice was deadly serious. "Trust me, we need to go now." The cramping was getting worse, and I kept trying to remember exactly what that bread had tasted like. When we got to the ER, Nikos ran ahead to talk to the intake nurse. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but she looked shocked and waved us through immediately. As soon as the nurse saw us, the first question she asked me was, "Do you have reactions to precious metals?" The nurse asked as she prepped an IV. "What? No, I don't think so." My voice came out higher than usual. "Why would you ask that?" She exchanged a look with Nikos, but didn't answer. A doctor appeared with a portable X-ray machine, which seemed extreme for food poisoning. His face was serious. "There's definitely a metallic object in your stomach," he whispered quietly. Before I could even process what he said, an elderly woman appeared in the doorway. It was Sophia's grandmother. Her eyes were red-rimmed like she'd just finished crying. The room went silent. Sophia finally looked at me, and the anger in her eyes made me shrink back. "You ate my flurry," she said, each word dripping with barely controlled rage. "Your what?" She sighed like she was sick of me and continued. "In Greek tradition, we have a lucky coin that we put into sweet bread. When you're the one to eat the slice of bread with the coin, you will gain the luck of 1,000 generations." I was mid-labor when my mother-in-law walked in with a camera and a huge smile on her face. "I'm here to capture the big day. 3 weeks ago, my husband and I strictly agreed on no visitors in the delivery room. I have preeclampsia, meaning high blood pressure during labor could kill me or my baby. And my mother-in-law always violated boundaries and told me my condition was in my head. I told my husband to get her out. He pulled up a chair next to my bed and helped her sit down. I looked at him and he shrugged. "You won't even notice her." That's when a flash hit my eyes. My mother-in-law was aiming her camera at me mid-contraction. I put my hand up and told her to stop. She lowered my hand for me and told me to hold still because I was coming out blurry. My husband squeezed my shoulder. "Just let her get a couple." The nurse called out that my blood pressure was climbing. My mother-in-law saw the number and laughed. "This silly stuff is all in your head, sweetheart." Right as she said that, a contraction hit me and I gripped the rail. She leaned over me, tapping my chest and saying it was hurting because I was pushing wrong. "I did this once before, honey, trust me." My husband stroked my hair. "Listen to her, honey. She knows better than you." The nurse stepped between them and told her she needed to leave. But my mother-in-law didn't move, and my husband wouldn't open his mouth. I closed closed my eyes from the pain, and suddenly a faint red light hit my eyelids. I opened them and her phone was inches from my face. She was recording me. I tried to push her away, but she moved her phone. I looked at my husband just standing there and wanted to cry. The nurse called out another number, now dangerously high. My mother-in-law's head snapped toward the nurse. "I'm sick of everyone enabling her made-up condition." She reached across me and turned the volume on my heart monitor all the way up. "There!" she screamed over the beeping that was uncomfortably loud and getting faster. "Now, we can all hear everything is fine." I felt my chest tightening. The nurse turned the monitor down, but the number was now so high the situation was urgent. My most painful contraction tore through me. I doubled over, feeling like I was going to die. I begged my husband to hold my hand. He took it instantly. "Mom, a shot of me holding her hand would be beautiful." I squeezed his hand so hard my knuckles went white, but he didn't squeeze back. He looked at the camera as it flashed. That's when he said it. "Mom, come feel her belly. She's almost here." The nurse put her arm out. "Ma'am, you cannot do that." My mother-in-law shoved her arm down. The nurse backed up and said she was getting the doctor, leaving the room. I looked at my husband one last time, pleading with him to tell his mother no, but he just took her hands and placed them on my belly. "Here, honey," she said. "You need to push harder." Just like this, she suddenly pressed down on my belly hard. I screamed in the worst pain of my life, and my body thrashed, knocking her off balance. She stumbled backward into the IV stand. It crashed down, and the line tore out of my arm. Alarms went off. My baby's heart rate dropped. My vision went white. The doctor rushed in, calling for emergency C-section, and the last thing I saw before going under was security dragging her out. I woke up some hours later, still delirious. My husband was on the bed crying. My mom got arrested. I was almost relieved until he told me why. After the C-section, she went into the nursery to photograph our baby. She held her phone right up to our daughter's face for a close-up of her eyes, but her flash was on. The light made our daughter fully blind. My husband was crying, and every word was about his mother, nothing about our baby. I had the longest menstrual cycle of my life, and I just found out why. I was sitting on my boyfriend's lap when my coochie started bleeding. My boyfriend Silas helped me put a tampon in, but I soaked through it in just 20 minutes. We rushed to the ER, and when I bled through the examination table paper 3 times, they insisted on keeping me overnight. The ride home was silent, except for my apologies every time we hit a bump, and I felt another gush. For 2 weeks, he kept making me these protein smoothies every morning, packed with iron for the blood loss. But the bleeding somehow got worse, and I was soaking through overnight pads in 30 minutes. When I mentioned this to Silas, he got defensive and said I was being ungrateful. His voice had this edge that made me shut up immediately. By day 23, I was going through a box of super tampons every 2 days. Silas had started this weird notebook, writing down timestamps and flow levels, and when I asked what it was for, he said, "Documentation," in this flat voice that made my skin crawl. The gynecologist prescribed birth control pills to stop the bleeding, but they made it 10 times worse. That's when Relina, his ex-girlfriend, messaged me on Instagram. My hands were trembling as I read, "We need to talk about Silas. It's about your bleeding." We met at a coffee shop where she pulled up medical records on her phone showing she'd had unexplained bleeding for 2 months. "It started right after Silas began making me breakfast smoothies," she said. "It stopped the day I left him. When I confronted Silas that night, he broke down sobbing. He admitted he'd been crushing abortion pills into my smoothies, and he did with Relina too." "Why? You told me that you wanted to try for a baby," I asked. "Because," he started, "I changed my mind and I didn't want to tell you the reason why, so crushing the pills was my only solution." I stared at him blankly. "Tell me why." He tried to put his hand on my face and kiss me to distract me, but I shoved him off of me. "Tell me why you forced me to have so many miscarriages." That's when he took out his phone and showed me an email. It was from an STD clinic, and it showed that he tested positive for chlamydia. "Did you get the STD from cheating on me?" I asked, voice shaking. He nodded. "Yes, but that's not the worst part." I stared at him and waited for him to explain, and he took out a photo to show me the girl he cheated on me with. My heart dropped. She was 14 years old. Silas dropped to his knees and started crying. "I can't keep this a secret anymore. It's been going on for so long that I don't even know who I am anymore. But I still love you. Please don't let this ruin what we built together." I turned toward the door, but Silas jumped up and blocked me, pressing his back against the frame, and I felt a knife against my stomach. I kicked him in the gonard so hard he would be infertile for life and call the police. I tried to unplug my son's computer after he'd been playing for 12 hours straight, and he threw a plate at my head. But it wasn't always like this. 6 months ago, the only screen he cared about was the scoreboard at his basketball games. His sneakers wore out every 2 months, but everything changed when he downloaded League of Legends. Within weeks, he stopped coming out of his room. Dishes piled up outside his door like a shrine. I tried canceling our internet plan, but every night his bed was empty because he'd sneak out to the neighbor's front garden and use their Wi-Fi to play on his phone. One day I went in to clean his room and found 6 bottles of urine lined up next to his chair. He didn't even look up from the screen. "Sorry, Mom, but going to the bathroom would have cost me my rank." I bent down to grab the bottles and froze. His legs were purple and bloated from sitting down for too long. I pulled the plug out of the wall. He ripped it out of my hand, shoved me backward into the doorframe, and plugged it back in before I could stand up. As a last resort, I bought 2 tickets to a basketball game we used to go to together every season. I went upstairs to tell him and the handle wouldn't turn. He'd installed a lock. I pressed my ear against the door and heard nothing. I threw my shoulder into the door over and over until the frame split open. My son was slumped forward over his desk. His legs were purple and swollen. I grabbed his shoulder and turned him toward me, and he was cold. They said he'd been sitting so long that night that a blood clot formed and reached his lungs and killed him. The basketball tickets were still in my hand when the paramedics told me he was gone. I got my 5-year-old expelled from kindergarten on purpose. Riley spent the entire summer asking how many days until kindergarten. She'd cross them off on her calendar every morning. When the first day came, she ran into Mrs. Moldova's classroom without even saying goodbye. I stood in the hallway and cried, happy tears. Mrs. Moldova had been at the school for 18 years. Every parent wanted their kid in her class. For 6 weeks, Riley came home glowing. She talked about Mrs. Moldova like she was a Disney princess. Then one Sunday night, Riley started sobbing and begging me not to make her go to school. She wouldn't tell me what happened, just cried harder. I went to Principal Roach the next morning. He leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Moldova is beloved here. She's been teaching longer than you've been alive. Maybe the issue is at home. By the end of the week, other parents stopped making eye contact with me at pickup. I was the crazy mom who accused the perfect teacher. I bought a notebook and started documenting everything. Day 1, I called Riley for dinner and she flinched so hard she knocked over her juice. Day 2, she climbed into my lap and whispered, "Mommy, am I stupid?" The word hit me like a slap. Day 3, she'd wet herself at school. When I asked what happened, she just stared at the floor. I volunteered in the classroom. Mrs. Moldova smiled the whole time, spoke in a soft, patient voice. I watched Riley. She sat perfectly still at her desk, didn't move, didn't speak unless spoken to. The other kids wiggled and laughed. Riley looked like a statue. At pickup, I knelt next to a boy named Nick, asked if he liked kindergarten. He leaned close. Mrs. Moldova yells when the mommies leave. She calls us bad words. I drove straight to Principal Roach, showed him the notebook. He closed it without reading it. "If you continue this harassment, I'll involve the police." I sat in my car and screamed into the steering wheel. No one was going to help me. The only people above Roach were the school board, and they only get involved for serious matters, like expulsions. I explained the plan to Riley, told her to refuse Mrs. Moldova's instructions until someone came. She started crying, "But I'll get in trouble." I held her tight. "I know, but this is how we make it stop." The expulsion letter arrived that Friday. I requested a formal board hearing. 5 board members at a long table. Principal Roach sat with a folder. Mrs. Moldova sat next to him, clutching a tissue like a prop. Principal Roach spoke first. Riley displayed repeated defiance. Her mother has harassed staff with baseless accusations. Mrs. Moldova wiped her eyes. "Some children are just difficult." The board chair looked at me. "Your response?" I stood. "I didn't come here to fight the expulsion. I came here to tell you why I caused it." The tissue in Mrs. Moldova's hand stopped moving. I pulled out my folder. 2 months of documented changes in my daughter's behavior. Nightmares, bedwetting, flinching. I set the journal down. Written statements from 3 families whose children described identical experiences. I set those down. And an audio recording I made by hiding my phone in Riley's backpack. I pressed play. Mrs. Moldova's voice filled the room. "You're all stupid. Every single one of you. You think your parents love you? They dump you here because they can't stand you." A child crying. Then Mrs. Moldova again. "Shut up. Shut your mouth or I'll give you something real to cry about." Dead silence. Mrs. Moldova shot to her feet. "That's fake. She's been trying to ruin me for months." A woman in the back stood. "My son told me she yells." I didn't believe him. Another parent stood. My daughter said the same. Then another. "Mine too." The board chair turned to Principal Roach. "How long have you known about this?" He didn't answer. "How long, Roach?" "There have been complaints. A few. Over the years." "How many?" Silence. 6. Mrs. Moldova was arrested 3 months later. 14 counts of child abuse. Principal Roach was fired for burying complaints going back 6 years. The same moms who called me crazy now ask for parenting advice. I leave them on red. My grandmother said she'd do whatever it took to get me pregnant, and she meant it. My mother had her first baby at 16. My aunt had hers at 14. So on my 16th birthday, my grandmother pulled me out of school so I could be the next mother. She moved into our house and took over my bedroom, putting me in the room next to hers so she could monitor me at night. Mom let her do it. The first boy showed up 2 days later to put a baby inside me. His name was Fletcher, and he wouldn't look at me. Granny sat us in the living room and explained that Fletcher had been selected as a potential father for my first child. "She's entering her fertile years," Granny told him. "Whoever succeeds first gets $5,000. Fletcher's mother nodded along like this was completely normal. I tried to catch Fletcher's eye, to signal that this was insane, but he just grabbed the bulge in his jeans like he couldn't wait for the baby-making process. After he left, I told Granny I would never participate in her sick plan. She slapped me so hard my entire body vibrated. I tried to run out the back door. She'd installed a deadbolt that locked from the inside with a key only she had. The next day, she brought over a new boy for me to be my father instead of Fletcher, because Fletcher found out he was infertile. It was a nervous kid named Warren, and when we were alone, I tried to tell him that he had to save me because this was all against my will. He said, "I know, but my parents will kill me if I don't go along with it." We did the squirrel dance while I lay there completely flat. After that, I stopped eating because I thought if I got sick enough, they'd have to take me to a hospital and I could save myself. But Granny just force-fed me through a tube she bought online. "I know all your tricks," she said. "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." She started putting something in my food that made me dizzy and slow. I confronted her, and she said, "They're just vitamins for fertility supplements." I was running out of options and running out of time. Granny announced that my window was approaching, and she'd scheduled all 3 boys to visit on the same night. "One of them will succeed," she said. "If none of them can do it naturally, I have other methods." I asked what that meant. She showed me a medical syringe and a collection cup. "I'll get what I need from them one way or another," she said, "and then I'll put it where it belongs. You don't have to participate. You just have to lie there." I realized I was going to be assaulted no matter what I did. That night, Granny tied my wrists to the bed frame with scarves. She brought in Warren first. He stood in the doorway, looking like he wanted to die. "Go on," Granny said, pushing him toward me. "Do what you're here for." Warren shook his head. "I can't do this. She's crying. I don't care if she's crying. This is what women are for. She's a teenager. So was her mother. Get on that bed or I'll tell your parents you refused." Warren backed toward the door. "I'm not doing this. This is insane." Granny lunged at him, and they struggled in the doorway. While they fought, I managed to work one hand free from the scarf. I reached under my mattress where I'd hidden my old phone that Granny thought she'd destroyed. I'd found it in the trash, and the screen was cracked, but it still turned on. I dialed 911 and shoved it under the pillow before Granny could see. The line connected, and I started screaming as loud as I could. "Help me! My grandmother is trying to make someone assault me. Please help!" Granny whipped around and tried to grab the phone, but Fletcher blocked her. "Get off me!" Granny screamed. "This is family business! Lady, you're trying to have a child assaulted." The dispatcher heard everything, and my granny was arrested. Me and Warren still F on the side. I told my foster sister I wanted to meet her boyfriend. When I saw who it was, my entire body froze. When I opened my front door to let my foster sister and her boyfriend into my home, she had this huge smile on her face and led me inside. And when I locked eyes with her boyfriend, I immediately got that feeling when you think you recognize someone, but you don't know why or how. I told myself I was imagining things. "Nice to meet you," I exclaimed, trying to hide my confusion. He smiled back. "Nice to meet you too." Even his voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't figure it out. My foster sister jumped up, completely oblivious. "I'm so happy y'all are finally meeting." I tried to avoid eye contact with the man, but I could feel his eyes burning through me. And when we locked eyes, he smirked. That's when I knew for sure. He was my biological father, the same man who got arrested when I was 9 for doing things to me that I still can't talk about. I thought I'd lost him, and now here he was, standing in my foster sister's living room, dating her just to get to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My sister spoke again, clearing her throat like she was picking up on the sudden tension. "Ahem. Does anyone want something to drink?" I knew if she left that room, my father might unalive me. I spoke. "No, stay here." My father smirked, knowing I was scared. "Yeah, I'm okay too. I got everything I need right here." I sat there frozen as my sister walked out, and the second she was out of sight, everything changed. My father's smile dropped. He leaned toward me, and his voice got low. "I told you I would find you. And look at you now, all grown up. Thought you could disappear forever, huh? Christmas?" Christmas was his nickname for me. He used to call me that because the first time he touched me was on Christmas Day. My throat closed up with fear. He kept going. "You ruined my life. You know that? I spent 7 years in a cell because of you." He tilted his head like he was studying me. "I had a lot of time to think about what I'd do when I found you. And trust me, I thought about it every single day." He smiled. "And you're mine again, Christmas." My sister came back into the room, and instantly his posture relaxed. The friendly smile came back. He said, "So good to finally meet your family." My sister sat back down and took out a menu for a Panda Express nearby. I sat there frozen, trying to figure out what to do, when suddenly there was a loud knock at the door. "Finally," my sister said before standing up to open the door. Behind it were 2 police officers. "Is Larry here?" they asked. I froze. Larry was my father's name. "He's wanted for violation of parole and breaching a restraining order against his victim." My sister pointed straight at my father. "He's right here, officers." As they put the officers in handcuffs and led him out, he turned and looked at me one last time. "I'll be back, Christmas." Then he was gone. I turned to my sister with tears running down my face. "How did you know to call the police?" She looked at me, and her eyes were wet too. "When I went to the bathroom, I heard him call you Christmas. You told me that's what your dad that hurt you used to call you. I knew it meant that he found you, so I called the police." The toddlers at my daycare were getting hospitalized, and when I found out why, I started laughing. I was working at my daycare when I saw a 5-year-old stumbling around the classroom like a drunkard and slurring her words. Me and the other staff members assumed it was some sort of weird sugar crash and called her mom to pick her up early. But a week later, it happened to 2 more kids, then 4. All of our work phones were blowing up with worried texts and calls from parents 24/7. Me and my team were all as confused as each other. In 1 week, my supervisor called CPS on 3 families because he was convinced the parents were the cause. They found nothing. We tried to call the police, but there were 4 missing persons cases that week, so all the detectives were too busy to take our case seriously. Parents were pulling their kids out of the daycare, and our customers were dropping like flies. My manager was going insane, and she was convinced it was one of the staff members. She pulled me aside one day and said, "I'm sending all the other staff home with paid time off. Everyone except you and Gabriella. I need to see if this makes the problems stop, and if it's one of us." Unfortunately, the problems didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. 3 children got sick in 2 days. One went to the ER when her heart rate spiked way past normal levels. Luckily, we found something. There was a pattern. Every single incident happened between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. after nap time. I myself didn't know what to do with this information, but Gabriella did. I was at home one night when she called. "Hello, please come into the daycare right now. I'll pay for your Uber if you don't want to drive. She sounded hysterical, but I agreed because I couldn't keep watching kids get hurt under my care anymore. When I walked into the daycare, I saw Gabriella going through Google Excel sheets with our schedules on them. And as soon as she saw me, she grabbed my arm. Look, almost every single sick kid has been in the art room on the same day they got sick. The art room has to be linked to whatever's going on. Without thinking, we sprinted down the hallway to the art room. We practically tore the place apart looking for the answer. The paints looked fine, markers normal. But that's when I opened the Play-Doh cabinet. Everything seemed like it was fine until I opened the blue lid. There was this faint chemical smell that made my nose tingle. It was wrong. The next morning, we had the Play-Doh tested. Positive for sedatives. Someone had been spiking our Play-Doh. What haunted me the most was that I knew my coworkers better than anyone, and I knew it wasn't any of them. They cared too much about the kids. But then something happened that made everything make sense. We were a day away from shutting down when one of our delivery drivers mentioned something weird. I saw someone from Headley, the daycare across town, near our delivery entrance 3 times this month. We gave the evidence to the detectives, and they figured it out. Turns out, Headley was our competing business, and after we opened, they started losing clients. So they started spiking the Play-Doh to make us lose clients. The owner was put in prison, and last I heard, the inmates found out what he did and killed him, and I laughed. We were already late for school, but then I remembered. Mom, wait, I forgot my medication. She slammed on the brakes. Oh my God, again with this stupid epilepsy stuff? But if I didn't take them, I'd be at huge risk of having a seizure. I knew I had no choice and reached for the door handle, but the locks clicked. Mom, let me out. No, I'm not gonna be late because of your dumb fake disease. But I unlocked it and jumped out. I ran inside, but I heard her behind me. I knew I just had to take them, but she grabbed them. Mom, I need those. She held them up above her head where I couldn't reach them, and my little brother yelled, Mom, she needs them. I've seen her have a seizure before. It's scary. So you really think flashing lights will give you a seizure? And before I could react, she started flicking it on and off as fast as she could. Flick, flick, and I felt shooting pain through my head instantly. Mom, stop. Ah, but she just laughed. Ha ha. Oh, come on. You're fine, you little faker. I could hear my brother crying now. She's not faking. She could die. Well, how come she's not spazzing yet? Maybe the lights aren't bright enough. I prayed she'd stop until she said, okay, fine, here's your meds. But just as I looked, she grabbed my head. I felt a strap on the back of it, and I saw the brightest flashing colors of my life, completely surrounding my vision. She put her VR headset on me, playing flashing strobe lights and dubstep. I felt my legs shaking, then my arms, and I did everything to resist. My brother ripped it off. Mom, stop it right now, and threw it at the wall. What the hell, you brat? That cost $500. I was barely conscious, but heard, this better not be broken, or you're next. She put it on, still mocking me. Oh, look at me. I'm gonna start flailing my arms to get out of school. But then she stuttered. It's just a fake dis. What? But she fell over, kicking the wall, completely out of control. We thought she was joking until he pulled it off. Her eyes were rolled back and was seizing, and we found out where I got my epilepsy from. She better hope there's no strobe lights in jail. My older brother refused to follow my parents' strict bedtime rule, and it ended up saving our lives. Me and my older brother had the strictest bedtime rule of any family I knew. 9 p.m. meant lights out, no exceptions, no matter what. It didn't bother me much because I was 7, but it affected my brother a lot. He told me how he felt left out sometimes because his friends constantly texted about late night shows and online games he'd never see, but he tried everything to change their minds. He offered to get straight A's in exchange for a 10:30 bedtime. He showed them studies about how teens only need 5 hours of sleep to function well compared to kids and adults, but they still refused. When you're 18, you can destroy your sleep schedule all you want. That's when my brother became an expert at fake sleeping. He learned to lie completely still with his eyes shut, breathing so evenly that mom's flashlight checks never caught him. After the 10 p.m. inspection, he'd wait exactly 20 minutes for our parents to start their TV shows before taking out his phone that he hid under the bed of our shared room. And our parents never really caught on. But then, one day in April, everything changed. A massive thunderstorm took over the town. The thunder practically shook the ground each time it got closer. But my parents still had the bedtime routine set in stone. So my brother did what he always does. He went to bed at 9 and waited until our parents fell asleep so he could play video games with his friends. Suddenly, at midnight, my brother shook me awake. I saw him staring down at me, fear filling in his eyes, his hands shaking. Do you hear that? He whispered. Yeah, it's raining a lot, I said, but he shook his head. No. It sounds like something worse is going on, he said. He grabbed one of Mom's spare flashlights, and we both peeked out from his room and looked down the stairs. Water had begun seeping under our front door, spreading across the entryway. Me and my brother ran to his bedroom window and saw the entire street was flooded. Some of the cars were already half buried in muddy water. He saw the water sloshing dangerously near the outlets and instinctively ran into the garage to shut off the electricity. Then he ran to our parents' room and shook Dad hard. Dad! Dad! The house is flooding! Dad barely opened his eyes and mumbled, go back to bed. Mom didn't even respond when he tried to wake her. The water was rising so fast it had already made its way up the stairs. My brother slapped Dad's face hard. Dad sat up abruptly with his eyes wide, angry at first, until he saw me and my brother burst into tears. Oh gosh, what happened? Why are you both wet? Did you go out in the rain? My brother grabbed Dad's phone and handed it to him. Dad, please call 911 now. Our house is flooded. Dad stumbled out to see the water already creeping up onto the first 3 steps of the house. His face went completely white as he scrambled to call an emergency hotline. Dad covered us up in raincoats and dragged us all the way up into the attic while we waited for the rain to settle down. Hours later, we climbed onto the roof of the house house and sat around while firefighters rescued us and our neighbors on boats and helicopters. They later told my parents that if my brother wasn't awake to turn off the electricity, it could have been fatal. Now our bedtime is 10. While I was in the bathroom, a girl said, "Can you climb in here? I need extra hands." I wasn't about to climb into a bathroom stall with a freak. "No, please. I think I might bleed out." Her voice was shaking, and suddenly, this wasn't funny anymore. I opened the door and saw Layla from my English class, and that's when it hit me. Everyone knew the rumors about her being pregnant. She was giving birth. I was 17 and barely knew how tampons worked, let alone babies. She started screaming, "Please, do something." I ran out of the bathroom, still in shock, sprinting down the hallway to Miss Bashar's classroom, bursting through her door. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. She followed me back to the bathroom, and as soon as she heard Layla screaming, she knew what was going down. She burst through the stall doors and saw her, and instantly got down on one knee. "Run, get the nurse now. She's gonna bleed out." I immediately ran to the nurse's office faster than I'd ever run in PE. When I burst through the door, the nurse was checking Casey's temperature. I didn't even think about how Casey was Layla's boyfriend and just screamed, "Layla's having her baby in the bathroom right now." The nurse came with me, but Casey yelled, "Wait, I need to be there for the birth of my baby." By now, kids were crowding outside the bathroom doors, trying to figure out what all the screaming was. We ran back to Layla, the nurse immediately helping her, but she grabbed my hand. "You have to get my boyfriend out of here. He can't see the baby." I saw Casey trying to push through the crowd of kids, but I stopped him. "You can't go in there. The nurse said everyone out." But he wouldn't budge. He kept saying he had to be there for the birth of his kid. Layla was screaming, and the nurse yelled, "Push!" The students joined. "Push! Push! Push!" Layla screamed one last time, then we heard crying. But when everyone saw the baby, everyone gasped. And as soon as Casey finally pushed through, he froze. We all looked at him in shock, because Casey was white, and the baby was perfect and beautiful, but definitely black. I woke up on Christmas morning to the sound of my son crying downstairs. I rushed down, expecting to see him and my husband surrounded by wrapping paper. Instead, my 7-year-old was sitting on his knees completely alone, looking at the Christmas tree in front of him. He was sobbing, and the tree was completely empty, not a single present underneath it. Even stranger, my husband was nowhere to be seen. Not the living room, backyard, even his car was gone. "Mommy, why didn't Santa come? Was I bad this year?" I froze looking at the sight. Me and my husband had spent all of last night wrapping those presents together at 2 a.m. We took pictures, had a slideshow of our wedding playing, and spent the night talking about how lucky we were. Now, all of our hard work was gone, and he was nowhere to be found. There had to be an explanation. "I tried to be good," my son cried. "I shared my toys. I left out my favorite milk and cookies. Why doesn't Santa love me?" I knelt down beside him and held his face. "Baby, Santa came. There was just a mix-up. Mommy's going to make some calls and get the presents delivered. I need you to go outside and build the biggest snowman ever so Santa can see it from his sleigh." He wiped his nose. "Really? You can get the presents?" I gulped, knowing I might be lying. "Yes, now go." He put on his snow clothes and ran outside with hope in his eyes. The second the door closed, I let my son cry, but only for a second. I went back upstairs while my son's son played and noticed my husband's closet was empty. Not only that, his wallet was gone, his keys were gone. I went online and saw I was blocked on his phone and every social media account. I realized this wasn't some mix-up. He hadn't been kidnapped by evil elves. He'd actually planned this. I thought about what to do when I remembered the tracker we put on his car 6 months ago. I opened the app and his location was live. He hadn't turned it off. 90 minutes away, at an address I'd never seen. I went back downstairs. My son was outside finishing his snowman. I told him we had to go on an adventure to get the presents because I found them. His eyes lit up. "Like a treasure hunt?" "Exactly like a treasure hunt." He babbled the entire drive about what he hoped Santa brought him. I smiled and nodded, but my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We drove past the city, through the countryside, and into a nice suburb I'd never been to. Christmas lights on every house. Then I saw my husband's car parked in a driveway, and my blood went cold. "Mommy, is this where the presents are?" I could barely speak. "Yeah, baby, I think so." We walked up, and I rang the doorbell. A woman answered wearing a Christmas sweater, and my mind went blank. It was my husband's high school sweetheart. My husband appeared behind her, and his face collapsed the second he saw me. I looked past him into the living room, and my stomach dropped. 2 kids were playing with presents. Our presents. The same ones we wrapped last night. On the couch sat the jewelry box I'd bought for myself, and the woman was wearing the earrings I'd saved for months for. My son tugged my hand. "Mommy, that boy has the race car I asked for." The woman turned to my husband. "Honey, do you know her?" I stepped inside. "Yes, he does. I'm his wife. This is his son. Those are our presents." Her face drained. "Wife?" She turned to him. "You told me you were divorced." I looked at the 2 kids. "Are those his?" She shook her head. "They're mine from my first marriage." I turned to my husband. "You left your real son on Christmas morning to play stepdad to kids that aren't yours. You stole presents from your own child." My son looked up at his father with tears running down his face. "Daddy, why did you take my Christmas presents? Am I not good enough for you?" My husband couldn't speak. His eyes were watering. "I can explain." The woman slapped him and kicked him out. He rang her doorbell for an hour before he gave up and walked away. He got drunk, fell asleep in the snow, and now needs his leg amputated. I told my substitute teacher I was in pain, and he laughed and said, "Drama club's down the hall, sweetie. I was in a lockdown drill in biology safety class, and he'd already zip-tied the door shut. Last month, I'd thrown up during his class, and my mom had called the school about it, so he was convinced I was faking to get revenge. The pain in my right side said otherwise. The only thing you need is to follow protocol. The pain doubled me over, and I screamed when I tried to crawl under my desk. Zainab, the girl heading to Johns Hopkins for pre-med, crawled over and pressed gently on my right side, and when she let go, I screamed loud enough for the whole room to flinch. That's rebound tenderness, she said, and her hands started shaking. Her appendix could rupture. She needs a hospital right now. Mr. Herbert folded his arms. Back under your desk, or it's suspension for both of you. Zainab stared at him like he'd lost his mind, but he just pointed at her seat. The pain spread from my side to my back, and my whole body started shaking. And then the vomiting started. Not normal vomiting, projectile. It hit the wall 3 feet away. Mr. Herbert looked at the mess like I'd personally insulted him. Mop it up. Kids are so useless these days. Lewis, whose dad was a surgeon, was gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles were white. That's bile. Green bile. That means she ate something green for lunch. Can we move on? Kids started pulling out phones under their desks, trying to text anyone, but the biolab had always been a dead zone, and not a single message went through. Mr. Herbert noticed the glow of screens immediately. Phones in the basket. Now, this is a lockdown, not social hour. So now we had no way to call for help, no way to open the door, and I was getting worse by the second. Sweat was pouring down my face, and Mia reached over and touched my forehead and yanked her hand back like she'd touched a stove. She's burning up, like scary hot. Fevers can be faked. Haven't you seen Ferris Bueller? He stepped over me on his way to collect the phone basket and didn't even look down. Half the class could see something was seriously wrong because I didn't look human anymore. Trevor ran at the door and slammed his shoulder into it, but the zip tie held. It's zip tied! Kids pounded on the windows trying to get anyone's attention outside, and the biology skeleton crashed to the floor as Trevor rammed the door a second time. Mr. Herbert sat in his chair and watched like this was a movie he was enjoying. Then something inside me shifted, like a rubber band snapping. The pain went from unbearable to nothing, just cold. The pain stopped, I whispered. Mr. Herbert smirked from his desk. See? Miraculous recovery. Just like No! Zainab and Lewis screamed at the same time. If the pain suddenly stops, that means it ruptured. My body started convulsing, not shaking. Full convulsions that I couldn't control. Mr. Herbert knocked his chair over, standing up, and pressed himself against the wall. Stop pretending. His hands were shaking now. The same hands he'd folded across his chest when Zainab begged him for help, but I couldn't stop. Black spots filled my vision. Zainab had both hands pressed against my side like she could hold me together. The last thing I heard before everything went dark was her voice. If she dies, you murdered her. I woke up 3 days later, missing 8 inches of intestine, half my colon, and parts of 3 organs. The surgeon said 5 more minutes, and I would have been gone. Technically, I did die for 38 seconds on the operating table. Mr. Herbert got a 2-week suspension. I watched a disabled kid get made fun of in my classroom, and it was the most wholesome moment of my life. I was in the middle of teaching class when I heard the principal's son say, "Why do you come to school if you can't even stand up properly?" I looked up from grading tests, and I saw all the boys pointing and laughing at Jackie, a 6-year-old girl, crying in her wheelchair. I literally felt my face turn red as I slammed my pen down and yelled, "Hey, what the hell did you just say to her?" Everyone in the class froze to look at me. I just told him to go to the office, but as he walked out, I remembered the principal was literally his mom, and in 20 minutes, she was at my classroom door. She instantly pulled me out into the hall, and I could already tell she was mad. She said, "How dare you yell at my son?" I tried to explain what he was doing, even pointing to Jackie still upset in her wheelchair, but she didn't care. "I don't care. You do not yell at my son." And without even giving me a chance, she told me to go home because I was fired, and I had to pack all my things while my class watched. Thankfully, another school hired me on the spot, and I was able to start fresh at another elementary school across the city. However, on my first day, I quickly got a notice that a new student was going to be joining my class. I had no idea who it was, and thought it was weird because the year was halfway through, and when I looked, I was in complete disbelief. There was Jackie, looking absolutely terrified as her mother pushed her into my classroom. She saw me and instantly started to look worried again, probably reliving all the times that the other principal made fun of her in public, and she thought I would do the same. The other kids were already whispering and pointing at her wheelchair, and I saw Jackie shrink into herself exactly like she used to, gripping her chair's armrests while her mother knelt beside her saying, "It's okay, baby. Remember what we talked about. Maybe this school will be different." I was about to go introduce myself to her mom, telling her this would be a safe space for her, since that kid wasn't here to make fun of her anymore. But before I could even say anything to them, another kid beat me to it. He ran past me and up to her and pointed at the wheelchair. The kid walks straight up to Jackie and starts asking, "Whoa, what happened to your legs?" And she gets so nervous, she tried to put her face into her shirt. Before I could get the kid to stop commenting, her mom quickly starts saying, "Well, she was actually born like this. Her legs just work differently. Cool, right?" And the boy looks at her weird for a moment, studying the wheelchair. But surprisingly, he says, "That's actually really cool. You get to ride around everywhere." She blew him a kiss, and they've been dating ever since. Braden walked up to my desk before first period, didn't even look at me, just held out his hand. "Got a spare pen?" Of course, I surrendered one of my best ones for the 6th time this week, just so he would get away from me. But things were about to get a lot worse than him stealing my pens. Mrs. Kim got fed up with Braden laughing in the back. "Braden, move next to Sarah, now." He grabbed his backpack, walked over, and dropped it to the empty desk right next to mine with a loud thud. Mrs. Kim handed out our practice test. 5 minutes in, I felt him lean over. I could feel him copying off my paper. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Mrs. Kim walked right past our desks, glanced down at both our papers, and just kept walking. Spoiler alert, when she handed back the graded tests, Braden got the same score as me, 94%. Mrs. Kim held up his paper. Braden, this is excellent improvement. I knew you just needed the right environment to focus. She was beaming at him, and then declared right there in front of the class, Braden, I'm moving you back next to Sarah permanently. He turned his head toward me and gave me this slow, deliberate smirk like he just won the lottery. That night, I was studying for the biggest test of the year when I reached into my drawer for a highlighter. My hand hit something plastic, and I pulled it out. A joke pen from a book fair 4 years ago. Disappearing ink. Right now, gone tomorrow, in obnoxious yellow letters. I held it up to my desk lamp and read the label again. Disappearing ink. I sat there staring at it for a full minute, then slowly reached for my nail polish remover and razor blade. I spent 20 minutes scraping off the label until it looked completely normal. Then I wrote out practice problems on scrap paper and set it on my nightstand. The next morning, the paper was completely blank. I smiled so wide my face hurt. I put the pen in my bag and practically ran to class. My leg was bouncing as I watched the door. At 8:47 a.m., Braden walked in. I pulled a pen from my bag and set it on my desk. He didn't even greet me, just scooped it up. Thanks, he muttered, shoving it in his pocket. During the final exam, I positioned my paper so he could see it perfectly from his seat. For the first time, I didn't cover my answers with my arm or angle my body away. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I worked through each problem slowly, making my handwriting as neat and clear as possible. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Braden's pen moving in perfect sync with mine, copying every number, every equation. When Mrs. Kim called time, Braden handed in his paper with this satisfied look on his face. But when the results came in, I failed. I dumped my bag and pens scattered everywhere. One rolled past my feet and I saw the faint scrape marks where I'd removed the label. I'd been so focused on ruining him that I ruined myself. I accidentally super liked my boss on a dating app. He called me into his office Monday morning and said he couldn't swipe right even if he wanted to. My thumb slipped while scrolling Saturday morning, and suddenly the premium swipe animation exploded across my screen. You super liked Connor! I actually screamed loud enough for my neighbor to knock on the wall. Connor was my direct supervisor at the consulting firm, the man who controlled my assignments and performance reviews. The thing that made this worse was that I've had a ridiculous crush on him for 6 months. The way he rolled up his sleeves during long strategy sessions, how he remembered every detail from every meeting, the way he laughed at my terrible jokes during client calls. But having a crush on your boss was something you buried deep and never acted on. Certainly not with a super like that sent special notifications. I spent the weekend spiraling while stalking his profile. He'd been active Saturday afternoon, then Sunday morning, then Sunday night. Each time I checked, my stomach twisted, knowing he'd definitely seen it. My roommate found me lying face down on the couch at midnight, laptop open to job postings in other cities. Monday, unfortunately, arrived. I got to the office at 6 a.m., hoping to barricade myself in my cubicle before Connor's usual 7:30 arrival, but his car was already there. I managed to avoid him until 10 a.m. when he sent me a message. Need to discuss the Hale account. My office. Now. The walk to his corner office felt like approaching a guillotine. He was standing with his back to the door, looking out at the city skyline. Close the door, Eloise, he said without turning around. I closed it and stood near the exit, ready to bolt. Sit down. We need to talk about Saturday. My legs gave out and I collapsed into the chair. Connor, I'm so sorry it was an accident. My thumb slipped. I understand if you need to report this to HR, I can transfer departments. He finally turned around, expression unreadable. You super liked me. It was an accident, I repeated desperately. I was half asleep, scrolling too fast. Eloise, he sat down. I need to ask you something. I need you to be honest. When you saw my profile before your thumb allegedly slipped, what did you think? The question caught me off guard. What did you think when you saw my profile before the accident? I felt heat rising to my cheeks. I don't know what you want me to say, the truth, because I've been sitting here since Saturday trying to figure out what to do. I need to know if this was really just an accident or if maybe some part of you meant to swipe right anyway. Connor, you're my boss. I'm aware, he said, leaning back. I'm very, very aware, which is why I've been driving myself insane all weekend. He ran his fingers in his hair. When I saw your profile, I couldn't swipe right because I'm your boss. It would be inappropriate. It could ruin both our careers. But you super liked me, and for about 10 seconds, I thought maybe the universe was giving me permission until I realized it was probably an accident. He walked to the window. Was this real? Was he saying what I thought he was saying? But I need to know, Eloise. Was any part of it real, or was it completely an accident? I stood up, legs shaky, took a leap of faith. If you weren't my boss, I would have super liked you on purpose. I would have swiped right immediately. But you are my boss, so yes, it was an accident. My thumb slipped because I was nervous seeing you there, and I was holding my phone too tight. He turned to look at me. Something changed in his expression. Hope, I'm leaving the company, he said suddenly. What? I got an offer 2 weeks ago. I accepted it Friday. My last day is March 15th. The room spun slightly. You're leaving? He nodded. Which means in 3 weeks, I won't be your boss anymore. The weight of what he was saying settled over the room. So, would you let me take you to dinner on March 16th? Yes, I said. A little girl stole my water bottle, so I made sure it fought back. I work at an amusement park, and while checking harnesses, I saw the girl in row 3 with a purple water bottle covered in stickers. My heart stopped. I sprinted to my booth, empty. My hydro flask was gone. The one covered in stickers from the road trip with my mom before she died. The only thing I had left of her. When the ride came back, I watched the little girl chug from the bottle so hard I thought she was going to swallow it whole. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. My heart was pounding as I wiped the sweat from my forehead and forced myself to walk over to them at the exit. Excuse me, sir, that purple water bottle your daughter has is actually mine from my operator booth. He didn't even look up from his phone. No name on it, so now it's hers. Finders keepers. I explained it was from my personal workspace, but he just laughed and said something about how families spending hundreds deserved more than workers who just press buttons all day. The mom touched his arm and turned to me with that fake sweet voice. It's not very mature of you to make a scene. She's just a kid. My throat got tight and I felt my face getting hot as I watched these entitled strangers pass around the last piece of my mom like it was nothing. I turned back to my station, trying not to cry in front of hundreds of guests, but I couldn't help it. My eyes started burning and my lip quivered as I bit down on the canker sore I'd gotten during my rushed lunch break. The sharp pain shot through my mouth and made me wince. Then I ran my tongue over the raw edge and felt something shift in my chest. A slow smile spread across my face. I had someone take over my post and grabbed a red medical alert bracelet from the first aid kit behind my station before running through the crowd searching for them, sweating in the blazing summer heat. I found them near the exit, posing for photos. Sir, I approached with my most professional expression. He didn't even turn around. We already told you. Finders keepers. I know, but I really need to tell you something about that water bottle. I held up my wrist, flashing the red medical alert bracelet, then pulled my lower lip down to show the angry red canker sore. I have oral herpes, diagnosed yesterday. Extremely contagious. That's why I needed it back so urgently. The transformation was instant. The mom's face went white as she grabbed the little girl who'd been drinking from that bottle since she got on the ride. The dad's smugness morphed into rage. You gave my daughter herpes! The mom yanked the bottle away and dumped hand sanitizer into the girl's mouth. The little girl gagged and choked as foam spilled everywhere while her mom kept scrubbing at her lips frantically. Then in front of hundreds of people, he grabbed my arm and shoved me hard. I hit the pavement and the impact knocked the wind out of me. He stood over me with his face turning purple and pulled back his fist, about to swing down at me, when a security guard tackled him from the side. This woman hurt my daughter, he screamed, trying to backtrack as the guard pinned him down. The security guard looked at me on the ground, then back at him, and I'm guessing she pushed herself to the ground too? Security escorted them out while they screamed about their contaminated daughter. They'll figure out I don't have herpes eventually, but in that moment, they finally understood what it felt like to lose something they couldn't get back. I was eating lunch, texting my mom, when we heard someone scream from the hallway. She came running down the hallway, still screaming, but we heard a really loud bang. We all froze until someone yelled, "Somebody, help, he has a gun," and everyone completely panicked. I remember freezing up because I didn't know where to go. The room was all windows, and everyone started flooding out the back door. I couldn't move, but another guy went to hide in a utility closet behind us. I looked towards the door, but he pulled me back, so I went inside with him. We were both stuffed in there, and both stood there silently crying for about 5 minutes, plugging our ears. But when we opened the window on the door slightly to see out, as soon as I did, I saw they were inside the library. We stayed as silent as we possibly could, and my mom wouldn't stop texting me, but just as I pulled it out to put it on silent, I dropped it. Both of them looked over at the door. We couldn't move, but I realized if my mom calls me, my phone would go off. We sat there with our hands over our mouths, trying to breathe as quietly as we could, and I was praying they wouldn't look inside. My mom could call me any second. She always did. And when I looked, I saw them right outside. They were coming towards us with their guns, and I was about to faint from stress. He reached for the door handle, but I grabbed it. I wasn't letting him turn it. I used all my strength to stop him from opening it. He kept trying to open it, but we heard the police in the school, and they ran. I couldn't stop shaking, but when I asked my mom why she didn't call me, she said she didn't want it to ring in case I might be hiding. Our high school janitor hopped the Mexican border for money to feed his 2 daughters back home. Once teachers and staff found out he was an immigrant, they realized they could pay him way below the minimum wage, and there was nothing he could do about it. But this never stopped Pedro. He came to work with a smile every day, and even shared his lunch with the kids who couldn't afford lunch that day. But one day, Pedro came to school with red eyes. All the teachers said he was high, but all of us students knew that Pedro had been crying. A group of us asked him what was wrong, and he told us that the school board dropped his hourly pay from $8 to $4.50 to save money, which meant he had to pick which one of his daughters to send to school. But the other students and I had a plan to save Pedro. At 11 a.m. the next morning, every single student got out of their seats, marched to the front of the school with signs, and chanted, "Pay Pedro." We did this every day for a week until parents complained to the principal. He was forced to agree, and now Pedro can send both of his daughters to school. I wish my 9-year-old wasn't alive anymore. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my daughter Alexis grabbed her crayon in her fist and lunged at my face, trying to stab it into my eye. I caught her wrist just in time and she started screaming, "I'm gonna cut you open and wear your skin like a dress, Mommy." When she came back to herself 20 minutes later, she was just my little girl again, crying in my arms and repeating, "Mommy, I can't control myself anymore. I'm sorry." I tried to bring her to the doctor, but they thought I was exaggerating. After that, the episodes only got worse. I put locks on every door and hid anything sharp, but my baby girl had turned into something that terrified me. The worst episode came out of nowhere on a random Wednesday. My 7-year-old son Jude was doing homework at the kitchen table while Alexis sat across from him drawing. She'd been calm for 3 days straight, which felt like a miracle. I walked to the pantry to grab them a snack, and that's when Jude screamed. I spun around and saw Alexis standing over him with scissors buried 3 inches into his shoulder. She was whispering. The voices said, "Your blood will make the screaming stop," while Jude bled all over my kitchen floor. I tackled her and pinned her down, and she looked up at me with these empty eyes and said, "I'm gonna off him, Mommy. Then I'm gonna off you. Then everything will finally be quiet." After that, Jude needed surgery and over 20 stitches. I couldn't take it anymore. I filed for an emergency court hearing for her to
You
move to a
look
special
like
kids
you
hospital. The
make
courtroom
it
was
like
just this
this.
small room with wood walls and lights that buzzed overhead.
Subscribe.
Alexis wasn't there because she'd had an episode